RGT85, age 40, is wrong about Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes. Specifically, his take downplaying the additions to that remake, which subsequently nerfed integral aspects of the gameplay's rewarding challenge and balance, even identity. So in part 1 of this video, we will take a look at RGT85's stance on the Twin Snakes situation, where he will downplay many of these additional changes as no big deal. In part 2 of this video, we will be extending this Metal Gear scenario to an analogy of a football game, and demonstrate the irreparable problem that occurs by showing you how much is lost from a football game if you abruptly make changes to the rules. You'll start to get a sense of how much is unacceptably ruined in a video game remake such as the Twin Snakes. And finally, in part 3 of this video, I will be delivering RGT85 his sentencing, which will specify what he needs to do in order to atone for this situation. Alright, let's get right into it, folks. We're going to start with RGT85's comments on the first-person functionality that was added to the Metal Gear Solid 1 remake, the Twin Snakes. Here it is.
Now, in Metal Gear Solid 2, they introduced a new mechanic where you could look in a first-person perspective and look around a level or even shoot enemies. Now, it plays a role in this game because of the fact that it actually makes one of the boss battles that happens earlier in the game a hell of a lot easier. The Revolver Ocelot battle becomes way too easy when you're able to look down this first-person perspective, and it takes a little bit away from the game for some people. Now, this is just one boss battle, but it definitely does feel a bit different than Metal Gear Solid with this first-person perspective, because now you can hold people up and shake them down and get items and stuff like that, which you couldn't do in the previous game.
Okay, so let's hone in on this. He says that this change, making the Revolver Ocelot battle easier, takes away a little bit from the game for some people. He's describing this in terms of for some people, because the people noticing that part of the game is missing and nerfed, it has nothing to do with which people. There's just people pointing out that the boss battle is sort of half pointless now. He's a pushover. RGT is really placing the issue, right, the heart of the blame and problem in the people reacting to, but it's like, no. It has nothing to do with the people. We're just talking about the game. What is the problem with making the Ocelot battle so easy? If someone's first time playing a Metal Gear game is the Twin Snakes, they're gonna plow through the boss battles and be like, well, that was unremarkable. This game isn't really offering me much depth or challenge. I just kind of feel like I'm going through the motions. Easily aiming, not having to really think much about my position or predicting Ocelot's movements. So if people come out at the other end of the game, absurdly easy to sneak through all the different rooms, because instead of having to use the established third-person perspective from the first game, using your limited visibility in order to establish the best plan of attack through the room, instead you can just switch to first person and tranquilize any enemy easily. Again, you're not undertaking a rewarding challenge, you are just going through the motions. Any room you enter is like a foregone conclusion, because there's nothing to stop you from aiming in first person at no real risk to yourself of getting spotted by a god. So we're going to now jump a little bit forward into RGT's video, where he will again, unfortunately, focus on the people reacting to the game, losing sight of the basics of what's happening in the game itself.
That's really where the controversy comes from with this game. By improving things, or thinking you're improving things, you're gonna alienate a small portion of your original user base. And with drastic changes, you really start to get the ire of people, and it's like, well, was this the right decision to do? The gameplay can be sort of adjusted to, and for the most part, I do feel like it does lead to a better gameplay experience outside of the Revolver Ocelot incident. That's really where the controversy comes from with this game. By improving things, or thinking you're improving things, you're gonna alienate a small portion of your original user base.
Right, so to frame it as you're gonna alienate a small portion of your user base, speaking about said alienation should go without saying. If they remade Metal Gear Solid, but they removed the character Solid Snake, and the only character you could play at was you had to make a Mii on your Nintendo Wii, would we then say like, oh, you don't want to do that, because that could alienate fans? It goes without saying that it will alienate fans. And this situation with making radical, nerfed, pointlessified Ocelot fight to now become a pointless pushover, that it will alienate fans? You might as well say, oh, you shouldn't steal that woman's purse because she will get upset about it, right? It's so pointless to say she will get upset because everyone knows full well what the issue with stealing a purse is. And so the only issue, as applying this to RGT's commentary, is that RGT doesn't see this as an automatically bad situation, that they would give it the first-person mode. And part of the evidence he is implicitly citing in that is to say, oh, well, a small portion of gamers are the only ones that are going to get upset. And he's sort of framing it as, oh, those hardcore fans are especially picky. They need everything to be exactly as it was. And perhaps the reason why a great many people wouldn't really necessarily take issue with it is because they're plowing through the game on mellow mode. They're just there for the story. The gameplay mechanics don't have to be super deep or perfectly represented. They're just playing the game for a generally fun, interactive experience, which is akin to playing a Sonic game just to run to the end of each level without concerning yourself at all trying to get an S rank for each level. Alright, so since a common bit of feedback that I get on my type of videos like this is that, oh, Alex, you're speculating, I am now going to rub your noses in it, as we review a subsequent clip with comments from RGT85, age 40, on the beloved Spawncast, Spawnwave Media podcast.
That was a point that was brought up with Twin Snakes, because Twin Snakes used Metal Gear Solid 2's camera system, and a lot of people were like, oh, it's ruined the Ocelot fight because now you could just switch to first person.
It made it very easy.
Yeah, it made it very easy and stuff like that. People got the fuck over it. You know,
People do kind of dunk on Twin Snakes, though.
Okay, so no one on that podcast panel pushed back on the specific thing of the first-person aiming, right? Josie's not going to push back on that. This case study is one of many examples of why my channel exists, where people are just dishing out their version of how the world works and then just sweepily move along. But let's debunk this. For RGT to say that people were upset about the first-person shooter and then they eventually got the F over it, who got over it? What are you talking about? All that happened is that 20 years passed from the Twin Snakes to now in the year 2025. Time passed. Nothing changed about that. Everyone that was disapproving of the first-person addition to the Twin Snakes has every reason to still share those concerns. That when you just throw new features retroactively into a remake of an older game, you're totally skewing the data to the extent where the finished product that you're dealing with, it's just not Metal Gear Solid 1, it's a different thing. So I will always push back against this fallacy where people will say years later, like, oh, everything's fine now, see? No, it's not, and I went through this whole same rigmarole when Sonic 3 came out in Sonic Origins. They remade the game with a new move and drastically different physics, so that now when you fight the Hydrocity boss, instead of having 3 different creative ways that you can attack Eggman, hit him in the dip down, stand on the water pedestal, or even launch yourself up with timing so that you can then crash land down onto Eggman. Now, in the remake in Sonic Origins, all of that is a moot point, because at any time you can hit Robotnik from the ground. Now this is an issue because how am I going to now recommend the Sonic Origins collections to people as a good entry point to Sonic? They're going to get to the Hydrocity boss and it'll just be, oh, this game, you kind of just go through the motions. RGT seems to not understand how these haphazard additions damage the quality, balance, and challenge of the game. So to say that you're alienating fans, stop making it about hardcore fans' picky preferences. A remake should only ever be the original game plus improvements, fixing things that they got wrong last time, not adding arbitrary quality of life things like a first-person view into a game that was explicitly designed to flow with only third-person views. So a Sonic game is one thing, but let's now connect this to a case study that is much more than video games right up RGT85's wheelhouse. It's possible that he's a fake gamer and that half the things he says he's just being provocative to try to bait people into comments to stimulate his algorithm performance. And that's the thing. In 2025 YouTube landscape, media literacy requires you to always be asking yourself, is this creator sincere, or should I, as insurance, start out by essentially, for all intents and purposes, assume that they are an AI that is algorithmically designed to say whatever possible to work up the most people to stimulate formulate algorithm stimulation. Now, I'm not saying that RGT is an AI, but it's a treat as if situation, so that you're not getting yourself worked up into a tizzy by the Tim Rogers of the world. You can't turn around and say that everything Tim Rogers said, oh, I was just in character. There is no William Tim Rogers. There is only Tim Rogers. Saying that you're in character is just a convenient cop-out excuse for you to let your worst self spill onto the stage. So RGT, in part 2 of this video, here we go. Let's talk about what would happen if you altered NFL football to the extent that these alterations were implemented into Twin Snakes. Let's say, RGT, that you saved up for NFL tickets to go see a game by your favorite team, and then the day before the news breaks that the NFL is going to change their rules this week to try to improve the game, spice it up for modern audiences, and so you get to the stadium and you find out that, we're not going to do the 4-down system. You get unlimited downs. You get as many tries as you want, over and over. So what does this mean? This totally throws off the balance of risk and reward. So now you're going to see fewer passes, because passes are like the bigger risk. You stand to get a lot more yards from passing plays, but it comes at a risk of interception. But if you have infinite challenge tries, more than 4 downs, you're just going to do all the safest, boring running plays. And so RGT, you would be sitting there in the stadium heartbroken, because you were here to see all these awesome passes, exciting interceptions, and also with infinite downs, now you get to the end of the game and people can just run down the clock. RGT would be sitting in the stands and saying, hey, this is not football anymore. In the same way that Twin Snakes is no longer Metal Gear Solid 1. And then, even worse, RGT is going to have to go home, see a video in his sub box from Arlo that says, oh, look at these new changes to the NFL. They updated the game for modern audiences, but inevitably it will alienate a small pocket of fans. And then you see a picture of an angry RGT85. That's what it feels like for you to go on that podcast and brush away the naysayers with your California sass. People got to fuck over it. If you're an AI being provocative, then don't take it personally. But since this is a perfectly common belief and sentiment that you are using your platform to reinforce and double down on, it led to the creation of this video today. Imagine you won front row seats to an NBA playoffs game, no shot clock anymore. Every team's possession lasts minutes at a time, because they are under no immediate balance and gameplay mechanism to ensure a more solid push and pull. You have an incentive to shot, which risks missing, and the other team taking possession. RGT would be sitting there being like, I'm getting ripped off from so much basketball content on the gameplay flaw because they've altered the game so drastically. RGT's hypothetical quote, this isn't basketball anymore. So RGT, are you a hardcore basketball fan that's being too picky? Or are you accurately recognizing that you know what the core balanced equation is for basketball, and you are rightly crying foul because you've changed it into something that is less interesting, purposeful, and dynamic? So with all that thoroughly established, we have now arrived at part 3 of this video, where I will now be delivering RGT85 his sentencing, which will specify what RGT85 needs to do in order to atone for this situation. RGT85, I hereby sentence you to explaining why the Twin Snakes remake is in any way different from that football or basketball example that was just outlined. Because otherwise, your logic by extension would mean that you're complaining at that football stadium is just a small, unimportant pocket of the fan base who is especially picky about these things and need them to all be exactly the way they are, because otherwise your double standard has been brought to the attention of everyone, and you betray your biases, RGT, in your Twin Snakes video when you literally sit there and you pick and choose which adjustments you're okay with and which you aren't. RGT appears to draw the line and say, yeah, the Ocelot fight being nerfed is unacceptable, but the rest of the game having first-person shooting is, I guess, fine to him. Is he now going to recommend Twin Snakes to his friends as an entry point to the series? And when they come out at the end of the game, they're rightly gonna feel underwhelmed because sneaking through the hallways, quote unquote, was really just going through the motions, shooting people down with no risk or reward or strategy. And because those newcomers have not played the original, they cannot put this in context to say, oh, alright, they added this first person for fun in the sequel, but I know what the true core game is. Only you know what that is, RGT, because you grew up with it. If you don't understand why introducing the game to a new generation with all these deal-breaking compromises and haphazard additions, you're hurting the Metal Gear Solid series, RGT, which is not acceptable. And so now that RGT 85's sentencing is crystal clear, it's now time to float an optional recommendation. Drop the 85 from your username, bro. Are you in middle school, or worse, even kindergarten? It's like you just drew a picture of a fire truck with crayons, and then you sign it, RGT, age 40, because it's 2025 right now. But no matter what you do, this has been Alex Yard, age 37, here at 91.6 WAYZ, the Alex Yard Zone. And I'm sure I'll run into RGT at the concession stand at an upcoming New York Knicks game. And if the NBA so much as thinks of getting rid of that shot clock, I will intervene, make sure they keep that shot clock there so as to preserve the gameplay dynamic of, dribbling, ball changing possession from team to team on a regular cadence. I'm spelling out things you all already know by this point. Good night, everybody.